Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off.
Okay, we are on episode 7. We're here to talk to you today about batteries. And everything that has to do with it. There's a lot of detailed, intricate, important information and a lot of safety concerns. So we want to make sure that we touch upon those as we go through this. But before we do, we like to start off each episode talking about what we've done in the hobby, what we went out and flew over the last handful of weeks. I think for since we last recorded, it's been about 3 weeks or so. And I know that Joe and I have had, it's closing in on the end of summer. And for me, school starts back up and I tend to be less mobile, as it were, as summer closes. And so getting down and visiting Joe and his wife is a little bit harder. So I said, this weekend looks like a beautiful weekend. Let's see if we can't get together for a day. It's, we're only a couple hours apart, so let's go out and get together. So we got a minute to get out and fly. Now, I've flown a ton of other things before this weekend. I ended up finishing I'll call it an experimental build style where I projected my design onto the foam on the wall, traced it out, cut it out, built it, and flew it. I maidened it. I tried a new technique with the Dollar Tree foam using spray paint for the first time for me. And I had some success, mostly. There's a couple spots I saw that I oversprayed, but that was just, I chalked that up to learning. But it turned out really great. And when I can fly the plane, which is a little fragile, it's a great flyer though. I took it out for a couple short passes and it was just a joy to fly. And I've flown a bunch of other things, most of which I brought out with Joe, and we had a good time flying. So, Joe, what were you working on before we got together this past weekend?
Well, I have finally put a plane together again.
Yay!
Yeah, I managed to get the Simple Soarer built. So it was built. I had a couple little things to finish up by the time you got down. But that just reaffirms that I am a slow builder. I
like the term deliberate.
Deliberate?
Yes.
Oh. Yeah, to an extent. Rachel, my wife, was out of town for a weekend going to visit a friend of hers. So I took that Saturday as sort of my relaxing and building day, and I think I probably spent 10 hours that day building the Simple Soarer, but yeah. I probably could have got a good deal faster, but I was relaxing, chilling, some me time, and had the laptop up on the desk and watching some Star Trek all day. So it was a nice, slow, enjoyable build process. But yeah, got the Simple Soarer built, and then you came down and we planned to go out. I had done some looking in the area, trying to find where we could go fly. And so didn't really get any feedback back on that, but we ended up going out to my old high school, which has a beautiful front lawn, front yard. It's a nice big open area.
That's like a front 40. It's a huge, wide open area with like a few scattered trees, except along what looks almost like an anti-ramming ditch, which honestly it might be. It looks like a drainage ditch, like it's been hidden as one, but I mean, it's almost like an anti-attack barrier somehow. Like you can't drive your cars through it, kind of stuff. I don't know. I guess maybe I spent too much time designing. I'll call it covert operations facilities, and that is an item, um, whether you believe it or not.
I can believe it, and honestly, for public schools, I could see that. I never thought
Yeah.
about it too much when even that day or when I was going to school there, but it the so the three access roads drive in a little bit, not too far, what, maybe 100 yards, and then there's
Right.
gates that of course close up, and they're not
Right.
just like big hulking gates, they're just swing gates, but that
Right.
is where the trench, the ditch, follows along, and it ties all three of those areas together. So I could see it being a barrier from people being able to drive across the front lawn to get into the
Right.
school if with a vehicle, if the gates aren't open. Never thought
And
about it that way, but
ultimately, no, right? And ultimately, it's not a big deal, really. Um, yeah. So if anybody's wondering, like, how big, so a picture, like, if you've watched Downington Abbey and you see the drive with that open lawn and that kind of thing, like, it's kind of like that, but there's 3 driveways. It's just happens to be the school's on a lot of property. It's beautiful. It's open. It's well kept. And we really, and fortunately for us, the gates are set back, you know, a pretty good distance from the
about
main
that
road,
100 yards.
which is plenty of room to fly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so we took advantage of that.
We did. We took the car out there, parked up. Nice hot day, but also very sunny. So nice clear skies, and we
It's beautiful skies.
we flew. I made in the simple soar, um,
Mm-hmm.
which we had to do some last minute finagling and strapping a battery onto the nose to get the CG shifted far enough forward. But yeah, so it was a bit squirrely. You actually managed to get up and fly your scout alongside me.
Right. I had taken out the Scout a little bit earlier just to show you kind of this is another example. What do we even start the day with? I don't think it was the Scout, but I pulled out the Scout. It's a great flyer. I've had it for freaking geez, I built it I think 3 years ago. Right when I started, I colored it up with like reflective red wrapping paper and red tape and blue tape and stars and all sorts of stuff. So it's like I call it my 4th of July or my patriotic flyer. It's got the Scout kind of has like a little cockpit built in with the way it's built. And
Mm-hmm.
so I always envision it with a Snoopy inside. So I have got this little FPV camera, and so I kind of made like a little Snoopy dog fighter with the camera in the head so that when you're flying, it looks like you're looking over Snoopy's nose over the front of the plane, and it's a lot of fun. So I was hoping to catch you on some FPV footage, but silly me didn't look to see if the FPV goggles had any recording media in it, and of course it didn't. But
Yeah, I was about to say
if,
it would have been really sweet to see what that glider looked like from Snoopy's
from the air,
perspective.
I know, right? If I could even keep it in view, man, I was having a hard time. Uh, Chasing another plane is a lot harder than I expected. Um, anyway, but you ended up getting yours up in the air, and you were flying
Yeah,
around just enough for me to knew that you were able to at least fly it for a while, so it wasn't like dramatically out of trend. Or maybe you were compensating well. I couldn't see the concentration on your face, so I said, things are good. And so I got the Scout out and I just started taking off. And so I joined you in the air we must have been flying for about a good minute and a half, right?
yeah. I think my total flight time with the soar was about 3 minutes. I'd have to go back and look at the video that you took from the ground, but it was probably about
Hmm.
3 minutes. And you got up in the air pretty quick after
Yeah, it was
we hand launched
maybe
mine.
maybe 15 seconds because I had everything ready. I had already
Right.
trimmed out the plane. I knew it was set. I had the flaps ready. My thing was good. All I had to do was power it up and go. So once I released yours into the wind and knew that you were going to be up there for at least a little bit, I decided it was a good idea to get up in the air quicker than it was later. So because I know how maiden flights can go.
Yeah. And as per normal, uh, I don't know what trim it needed, but it definitely needed something. So you say if it flew decently, and I was too busy paying attention to trying to not put it in the ground, to pay too much
Yeah.
attention to how well it did or did not fly. I kept it up in the air for a while, but it was squirrely. It was a
Yeah.
bit all over the place, and it was fighting me as much as I was fighting it.
So the tough part is okay. So when you trim it, like I know that when I release a plane, oftentimes I've either got to put one direction of rudder or another um, in to keep it level flight. And if it's one direction or another, then I can usually focus on trimming that. So that's not as huge a deal. But oftentimes that's what tends to be way off in the build somehow. Either I put the control horn in the wrong place, or I don't know what, a bunch of different things. So ends up being like I kind of have to hold the elevator in a certain place to keep it flying level. Usually the ailerons are pretty easy because if they're in line with the wing and even, um, you're only combating the gyroscopic precession and the torque roll from the motor, and that
mhm.
the natural stuff that happens with every single plane. It's just a feature of having a tractor motor. Um, so once you kind of adjust for the rolling, the natural tendency to roll to the right, I think is what it is. Once you've combated that, you're good to go level flight, and then really you just got to concentrate on the elevator. I know with the simple soar though, um, there is no aileron, so you're kind of sitting with rudder. So you're kind of naturally just sort of kicking the tail out in one direction, and that sort of compensates, but not perfectly.
Yeah, honestly, it was my first time, aside from the glider that I built before, um, flying a glider. So I gotta get a feel for that, and it was my first time in a while, flying. So I had gotten a bit spoiled on the Fogey, which was just so easy and so forgiving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Um, so
such a great plane.
it ended up nose down in the ground. Um, and so I got to rebuild
Yeah.
the power pod. Fortunately, the plane itself, and the fuselage, largely perfectly fine. A bit of crumple going on in the foam, but
It's like a
it's still
little
fine.
bit, right? But most of it
Yeah,
was in the power pod, and I think a lot of that had to do with we were worried about you had one battery for power and an extra battery for ballast, and I think I was worried about one of those batteries kind of scooting off, and I
mm-hmm.
wanted to make sure that they stuck together. So I grabbed an extra rubber band, which apparently was too loose with just one go around, and then almost too tight with two. And so when it hit, the rubber band ended up being like a crunch point for the foam on the pod, and it came apart there. Is
Yeah. I
what it
mean, it
seemed to do.
essentially tried to guillotine the power pod,
Heck
which
yeah.
is fine. That power pod I was going to need to rebuild at some point anyway, because it was the power pod out of the Fogey.
Yeah,
But
and I don't think
it's
if you get a chance and you're near like a Staples or whatever, get the fiberglass reinforced packing tape.
I really need to.
Right, at least a unidirectional. Some people get the bidirectional. Might as well be duct tape, but the single one is generally pretty lightweight, and it really does a great job at keeping a power pod on because the glue itself is cool as long as you don't ever mess up your flight. Like once it hits the ground, it's likely to weaken that joint between the firewall and the pod foam.
Mm-hmm.
And the strapping tape makes sure that's taking the stress and not the joint, not the glue joint.
Right. And we experienced some of that with my FT Delta when
Mm-hmm.
it bit the dirt. The only damage was that the firewall came off. So if I had had
Mm-hmm.
that fiber reinforced tape,
Yep.
maybe it would have stayed on, but also maybe there would have been other damage. Don't know, but potentially could have kept flying that day.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And that obviously the good news is I brought my simple soar, and we did get a chance to have you kind of goof around the skies and just relax and enjoy what I love about the Simple Soar is that it's just a very relaxing, easy flight where you get a chance to really feel what's happening in the air.
Mm-hmm.
With the air currents and any uplift and we were hitting like the time that we brought that Simple Soar out, a little bit with you in the earlier morning. I think it was around 10 o'clock or so, 10:30, and then
Yeah.
we brought mine out about an hour later, and we were getting a bunch of great poofy clouds which is evident that we have a bunch of little pockets of uplift and stuff, so you could really kind of just play around with the air currents, really.
And we would have been able to, because you were pointing out to me as I was flying yours, which after mine crashed, I would divert for a second, but after mine crashed, you were immediately, hey, why don't you take this one up? Why don't you take this one up? Offering me your planes, and
Mm-hmm.
I was very hands off, which was, I've crashed once today. My confidence is shot. I definitely don't want to put my hands on your planes and
Right.
end up tanking them. Which then
Right.
later we had a conversation in which you said no, it's perfectly fine, and I said, look, if you're saying it's perfectly fine, but I need to know, and I need you to know that if you offer to let me fly one of your planes, that you are perfectly fine knowing that I could tank it until I get a good feel for it. And if I do tank it, it's going to be in the dirt, and it might break in half, and it might not be flyable once that crash is over. And if you're fine with all that, and you say, do you want to fly my plane? Then if you offer at that point, okay, moving forward, I will accept the offer. But
Right.
yeah, and I appreciate that you did offer and that you were insistent, because we did put, I flew your Scout and I flew the glider.
Yep.
And it made me feel better.
Good. And I'm glad that was the point of it. That was what I was hoping that you could get out of it. That you could, one, gain your confidence back. I've seen you fly. Like, I know you fly really well. Like, you're a much better pilot than somebody of how many years, like months? It's like 8 months of experience. You've got a ton of flying experience, and it shows when you get hands on a plane that's trimmed out and ready to go. You can handle it.
It's just that trim out.
You know
phase.
what to do with it. It's right. It's the building process and learning how to get your plane flying the way you want it to. That's the hard part, and that's a big part of the learning process. I didn't want to rob you of that. I debated whether or not to insist we fly my plane, like my glider, and get that going, and have you fly that, so you knew what it should fly like.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But instead, I wanted you to get the experience of, like, you built this. Like, let's see if you can get it to fly. You're obviously very close. If you're able to release it from your hand at 2/3 or half throttle or whatever it was for the Simple Soar, and watch it go out of your hands and not crash immediately into the ground, you're very close. So honestly,
it was
I think
out of your hand.
Well, it was. I launched it for you because it's much easier to correct when you have both hands on the sticks right away, of course.
Ready to go immediately.
Exactly. And I knew that would give you peace of mind. And, so we did it that way. Worked out really good. And obviously that was the first plane I think you've really had to try and trim. Maybe?
The FT Delta needed some trimming. The Fogey.
Right, from the torque.
The Fogey needed a little bit.
Right.
And then we won't talk about my old glider.
Well, dude, you're still amazed. Anyway, well, that's what happens when you fly a tail heavy. So the cool part was we made sure it was balanced right, and I knew it was going to leave my hands pretty close to like set for success. The only other thing that I think that you and I could have done is if I had launched you had launched the plane and I was flying it to set up your trim.
Right.
And then brought it back once the trim was set, and then have you take it from there. But I also know what it's like. You spend all this time. I mean, heck, you spent an entire day building this plane, and it's your baby. Like you put a lot of energy and love into this plane, and here it is. You're trying it out for the first time. There's a lot of excitement and joy that comes into, okay, is this going to work? Like, come on, baby. Let's see if this
Mm-hmm.
is going to work. And if I had done it and sort of set it up right and just said, well, there's a couple things we had to fix, you'd have been like, oh, well, I guess I didn't do it right. But like you did, you flew it. You flew it for a minute and a half. And I think what ultimately got you, we were talking about it, that it was already kind of squirrely in general, like it was off and you didn't know how to really correct for it. So you were flying by the seat of your pants for like a minute and a half. And it got close to the ground and you kind of like either lost track of it for a second or you just went, oh, what the heck's going on? And you had to make a choice. You're either going to down left or down right, and you weren't sure what was what. You made a choice and you went with it. And sadly, so rather than come out of the dive and go level and turn, which is the right way, and if you had more than a second to think about it, you probably would have figured it out. Or the other way, which is down and right, which exacerbates the rolling dive and makes it
Right.
go down, like nose down, as opposed to correcting for it and coming back out level. So you made a choice, and unfortunately for you, it was and for the plane, like it was the opposite of what you should have done. But
Mm-hmm.
your plane turned out to have survived that crash really well. And I think you'll have that thing back. I hope you've already repaired it, but even if you haven't, you'll be able to
No, I haven't
repair
had
it
time
before
yet.
the next. Yeah, but you'll have plenty of time this week to get it ready for this weekend if you want to give it a go, and and
Yeah,
just
I am going to
you
try to get it repaired up for this weekend.
and you saw what we had to do with the Scout, right? I think I got it set so it's pretty level on its own, but I think I told you like keep a constant back pressure because it wasn't fully trimmed out right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I said once you've got it trim, um, you basically know what you have to do, and then that's what you tap into the trim until now you don't have to put any pressure on it. But like it's touchy, very
Mm-hmm.
touchy.
Yeah, the simple sword just first flight, first launch, you know, and I've trimmed in the fogey. I had to trim in the delta. It's there's a lot that you're fighting and trying to pay attention to in that first launch, and I haven't trimmed that many in, so
Yeah,
it's okay. Like
that's good
after
experience
you
though.
insisted, and I did fly some more of yours. Like I was feeling
Mhm.
better about myself in general. Like I'm not a piece of trash person. I
Right.
can't
Oh my
fly.
God, I know.
Uh,
Right. I don't know why we do that
I'm a
to
terrible
ourselves.
pilot.
I know, right?
Uh,
"Oh, I'm worthless. I shouldn't even be doing this hobby." Like, what the heck? Like, that's so far from the truth. Like, everybody goes through the same kind of deal. Like, we all
mm-hmm,
are so hard on ourselves for something that's really hard, and we're killing it. I mean, in many ways, like we're doing a great job. And I
yeah,
wanted you to walk away going like, "Oh, that's right." Like, no, it's just the way it is. Like sometimes that happens. And anybody you talk like we listened to another podcast, you were talking to Ron and he's been doing that for years, right? Like and listening to them, they're always like, it just happens. You know,
yeah.
you just tanked on the ground like, darn, you know. And you hear me, like you watched me. I tanked a couple, I think, of the planes I brought with. The Scout had an interesting fail. um, and you've seen me bring a couple into the ground, some of them tank into the ground, and then I just kind of go, oh well, that's what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, trying to pull any wool over your eyes. Like it happens. Like sometimes you dumb thumb it. You make that choice, left or right, and one of them is correct and one of them isn't.
Yeah. And
And
when it's in that situation, you're already if it was just straight on, but you're also
mhm,
dealing with well, I'm looking at it from the side. So which
right,
side am I looking at? Which side is it actually rolling? Which
right.
side do I need
Well,
to roll it opposite of? So it's it's one of those things where I only had a very just a snap decision, and I made the wrong
yeah,
call, which is fine.
that's okay. Yeah,
Fortunately in this case, I just need to rebuild the power pod, and it'll be back
yeah.
in the air. So
Which I don't remember what plane I was flying, where all of a sudden I go, uh oh. and you see me looking over your car along the tree line. So we're literally sitting at the back edge of a tree line, right? Like we're right in front of a big long line of probably 60-foot tall pines.
Pine trees.
And
yeah.
we're like just barely sitting in the shade. It's like a little small ditch, right? Drainage thing. Very shallow. And then there's the pavement, and then there's a bigger drainage, like it basically dips off into that field that we're flying over.
Mm-hmm.
And so behind us is a tree line. So I release a plane and I'm flying it around or something. I'm bringing it in and something goes, I can't remember what it was. Something went weird. And all of a sudden it's coming right at the tree line. And I'm going, uh-oh. Oh crap. Oh crap. I'm going to lose this
And I
plane
heard
in the
that
tree.
and looked up.
And you heard me go, uh-oh. And you look up and you're like, why are you looking to the right? I'm looking along the tree line and I literally, and that was one of those things I had to make do I go left and up or do I choose something else which it might not recover from? So I made a choice. It turned out to be just the right decision. I mean, I might as well have like touched the branches of those trees.
I think you,
close.
Yeah, I think you might have. Because when you went, uh-oh, and I looked over, your plane was, straight up, belly against the trees. And was in the process of stalling out. It was just kind of hanging there for half a second, and then it just kind of like did that back flip roll that it does when it loses all momentum, and you somehow skimmed the trees on the way back down and pulled it in and kept on flying. I was, what just happened?
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah, that was. I pulled that so out of my keister. It was incredible, and that that could have easily have been like, oh no, it's 40 foot up on that tree. It could have been.
Not
I just
getting
got
that
lucky.
one back.
Nope, not without some serious effort. Yeah, so I flew the Scout for a while. I love that thing. It's always flown well. I've been having a real issue with it with regard to the elevator. And I keep forgetting to go back and no, I got to go fix that because it starts out with an elevator, I think too far down or too far up, one or the other. And so I'm always having to correct it. So I'm like 3/4 of the way down for neutral flight. And that's where I start flying level. So it doesn't always have like a ton of room to pull out of some of the maneuvers. But it turns out right before I came down, and that was one of those planes where I literally pulled out of mothball. I call it out of mothball, but it was basically out of the dusty corners. And I was literally blowing off dust and taking a damp rag and actually wiping the whole thing down because it was just literally covered. You could have wrote like, it's time to clean me off in your finger and it would have shown up. It was pretty bad. But I switched out motors like right before I came down. I'm like, this motor died last time, like it either overheated or something. I'm like, I'm going to pull the flight test motor system off of this thing that I had flown, and I think I crashed. So I had it in a pod, but it was, let me take it off of that, and I'm going to put it on this pod, which is the Scout has a specifically sized pod for it because of the way the wing sits in the mid wing. So I had to switch it all out, and I switched it all out, and it basically screwed into the holes in the firewall, and some of the threading's supposed to catch into the balsa. But like this motor, I think I might have had a prop that was a little like a touch off balance, so it was vibrating just enough. Almost every single screw that was holding this motor on backed out and came off. And literally, when the Scout stopped flying, it was because the motor came right off the front of the firewall.
Yeah, it did.
And it was flopping around. And I remember you going like, that's not the right sound. And I'm like, oh, I don't have any. No, I've got control, but I don't have any thrust. Okay. And so I brought it in as gently as I could, which wasn't that gentle. It wasn't that gentle, but if I had, I think everything survived about it. If I had a way to mount that motor back onto the firewall, I could have done it and kept going. Yeah, exactly. It's such a durable plane. I really can't recommend that one enough. Definitely put that on your list.
That and your FT Aero is super durable. I mean, that thing is just kind of soft foam at this point.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. So I think
Okay.
after we did that, I pulled out the X-29. It's a jet that I have a 64 millimeter power system in, which is actually kind of undersized, but it's enough to fly. Like I've actually flown with it. And it flies pretty gentle and slow and all that stuff, which, maybe not the best thing for an experimental plane. But so I thought I had fixed like the throttle window or something that is the issue. I thought was the issue. So I launch it and it takes a really long, slow glide to the ground at full throttle. And I'm like, well, I guess it's not going anywhere. Let's put that to the side. And then I pulled out the Synergy, which if you look up Synergy double tail box wing, there is a company called Synergy, which they're looking to basically make a small commuter plane that goes between major cities, like let's say Pittsburgh and New York. It's not terribly long. It's for commercial flight, it's almost too short, but it's perfect for these little commuters. Maybe one that goes from Philly to Pittsburgh, 6 hours is, I think, like a typical drive time, where they're looking to make this craft would be a really good plane for the intermediary, right? And this thing, it looks like a football with a front swept wing, and then it like continue out like double the length and fold it in on itself. And so it looks like it's got like two little box wings. And then they come back at an angle that would double back towards the motor. And some people have seen like there's a it looks like an X-29 on the top wing, and it looks like a traditional commercial jet on the bottom wing, right? And they connect on the ends. So there's been variations of that kind of thing, and this is their variation. And honestly, I love the way this thing looks. It's got such a unique profile. And with a couple brightly colored like surface, I think I put orange on my surfaces and a line on the bottom. And I'll tell you what, it is so easy to see and tell the direction, and it flies really nice.
It's a cool looking craft.
It's a really cool looking craft. And so, and I recently put wheels on it because I got a 3D printer, so I was able to print out little hubs that fit the foam matting. I think it's polyurethane foam, or what kind of foam is that? That you have for like fatigue matting.
I don't know.
That's okay. So basically, I cut out the wheels out of the fatigue matting using a hole saw or an X-Acto knife, and then I fit it around this hub. And the hub is designed to fit right inside a pool noodle. So that's roughly the size of the inner diameter of a pool noodle. That's the size of the wheel hub. So I printed a bunch of those out. I put them on some wire, and I attached these to the bottom of the plane, and it flew great. It flew like it should. It was so exciting to just have it take off from the ground, like take off down the driveway that we were on, and right over the field. And we've got a couple videos that I uploaded to my YouTube site, and it just flies real scale. It was just a lot of fun to fly. It had enough. It was very sluggish on the up elevator, and that's partly how the way the servos sit on the design. But we just flew, we got to fly it around for, geez, what was that? Probably about 8 minutes.
Yeah, you got some good flight time out of that one.
Mm-hmm.
It had a couple flights because you brought it back in for a couple landings.
Yeah, exactly. some a little bit more abrupt than others. Yeah, I think, and that's the thing is, while we were flying it, somebody was coming up the driveway, and you're like, "Yo, somebody's coming in." I'm like, "All right, let me bring it in for a quick landing." And of course, I came it was hot and fast, and well, it didn't damage anything, but it was rough on the landing gear. But we got a couple more flights out of it, and I had a good time with it. And then I think that whoever pulled up in our driveway maybe decided that maybe that's not the best driveway to go in. So he went up the middle driveway so he could see what we were doing. He just wanted to kind of probably enjoy it before he went to work. And then shortly after I finished the Synergy, I put that away, and that's where I pulled out the FT Aero. And then that thing's got a 4S, and it's got the F pack so it's a 2205 2300 kV motor with 4 cells, which means it screams, and almost literally screams.
Yeah.
and I showed you what a very powerful motor on a capable wing can do, and we screamed it. You were screaming across the sky like, "Wow!"
It
That's awesome.
was literally screaming. I hadn't heard your planes do that before.
No,
So that was interesting to see. And then you said, "Yeah, I get unlimited vertical on this." So, yeah, okay. And you throttled up, and it started screaming. You pulled it back, and there it went straight up into the air.
yeah,
Well, dadgum.
going horizontal, quick 90 and straight up.
Yeah, there it went. Just kept going the whole time. Just wow. Dadgum, that thing is loud.
Right. And now this is the same plane. It's like two pieces of foam board. I've put the Thunderbirds. I can't remember. Basically, the Thunderbird skin on it. Somebody made one a long while back, and I skinned this craft with it. I've talked about it before, and then I covered it in packing tape. And that's really pretty much all I've done. I think I put hot glue on the edges to make sure that they don't curl up. That's because it already started to. Like, there's all sorts of issues with that. Anyway, so we flew that for a while. I can't recommend that enough. I've run into light poles, power wires, trees. I've tanked it nose first into the dirt a lot with the dumb thumb. And that was one of the things a couple weeks back. I was flying it much like I stole it, like I was when we were together. And I was doing like crazy acrobatics, tight loops, quick rolls, and apparently I did it, and the battery came loose. And this is while I was out. The club manager was mowing the fields at the time, so he was kind of watching as he was coming back on this pass, And this thing's whoa, and then I do this thing, and all of a sudden the battery gets ejected, and I can't remember why I wasn't paying attention to the battery. I was paying attention to the plane, and I didn't, for some reason, see the battery eject. But it will, like, all of a sudden I know, oh, there's no power. There's nothing. Oh, this is gliding down. Oh no. And it just came down real gentle, like a gentle leaf, landing quietly to the ground. And it did like kind of a little bit of a nose dump at the end, which is pretty normal. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not a big deal. If I could figure out what happened, I'll probably just adjust it, and away we go. And sure as not, that thing ejected the battery who knows where into the tobacco field. It must have tossed it real good. But like the whole time, like the club guy's like, wow, man, he's giving me a look like, dang, that was some kick flying. And I'm glad I was able to kind of show you what that wing is capable of. That's another one of those craft, like, dude, build it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Get an F-Pack motor, build that plane. There's a lot you can build, other planes you can build with the same motor system, but this one's just real good and easy. Yeah, and I think after we flew the Synergy, I ended up pulling out. I tried a couple other planes, things that I was looking to maiden, and like a servo was bad, or something like that. Where like it was working when I tested it before I left, but these things happen. And so I'm like, you know what? It's time to pull out the Simple Soarer. So I pulled out the Simple Soarer, got it hooked up, and I did a quick flight around to make sure everything was trimmed out right. And then at some point, I'm like, all right, dude, why don't you hook in? And so you grab your clip for your remote, clipped into mine. I unclipped, and you had the controller, and then we had like was it 22 milliamp, 2200 milliamp battery?
Yeah,
And
it was something. Yeah, it was your
I
bigger
so.
3-cell.
Okay, yeah, the 2200 milliamp 3-cell battery, and you basically took controls, and we had a bunch of thunderstorms like kind of way out on the horizon, and we knew they potentially could be coming our way, but we looked at the winds, we're like, maybe we might be lucky. So you basically flew it for like the next half hour or so.
Yeah,
20 minutes.
It was a good long time I was flying that one, and during that time you were pointing out, do you see that wing lift right there? There's a thermal, which I think the thermals would have been hard to ride that day just because we did have those thunderstorms coming in, so they would have been shifting around anyway. But yeah, got some real good flight time. Got to fly up, glide it down, fly back up, glide it back down. Took it a good ways up there.
Yeah, you did. Yeah,
And
you brought it to be real small so you could really catch the air currents way up there and enjoy them on the way down.
And to a point that it was high enough up, the headwind coming in off the storm front, I was able to get the throttle set right and hold the nose just right. That the glider was just basically hovering in place for several minutes. I think we were talking about just how it was just hanging there, like it was up on strings, just sitting there in the wind, not going anywhere. So that was very enjoyable. And your phone, the camera on it is nice because the clouds were something to see being out there, but then looking back at the video, man, like that was a beautiful sky. Even with the storm coming in, it was just a beautiful day to go flying. And then we saw some lightning, heard some thunder, and we were like, we'll fly a little bit longer, and then okay, time to bring it in. Brought it in, loaded everything up in the car, and 2 or 3 minutes later, the bottom fell out. So
exactly. Yeah, which is why I was packing up. I'm like, you good? You need anything? And you're like, nope. I'm like, cool. I'm going to pack everything up and put it away. So that way, the only thing we might have to pack up if it starts getting rough is that plane and the transmitter. And it turns out we didn't really need that, but it was nice to just be able to pack that up and head on home. So how would you describe, so that's really, I imagine, other than the fogey, that's your first glider experience. And I think it was just your first experience just chilling with the plane, it seems.
The fogey I got to chill a good bit with because I could, like, with its wing profile and the size of it and the weight of that craft, you could fly it at low throttle and just kind of, piddle around. Yeah, that was my first good experience with a glider because I had mine, but we've hit that one 100 times. That said, as much as I said I want to rebuild that one, once I built the Simple Soar, I was basically building a Simple Soar.
And that's what I told you. I was like, well, there's a plane that's almost identical to this. Yours has a bigger chord. It was a deeper wing, which means it's going to get a different lift. And I think you have, you built the fuselage a lot more robust so that the tail would be a little bit more rigid. I think one of the criticisms I have of the Simple Soar, which, I mean, it's not much of a criticism, but it's that the tail, as it gets towards the end, has a lot more give in it than I'd like to see.
Yeah.
But it tends to wiggle a bit.
Yeah, it was very nice. Like, it was very enjoyable to just be able to go up there and fly lazy. It was reminiscent of just being lazy with the fogey, but also different because it wasn't the same plane. It didn't handle the same way.
Right.
Yeah, I wish it had been a day that had good thermal columns, so we really could have played with that. But I'll play with that another day.
Yeah,
and I think it was a flying day that we both needed. I think we both needed that experience.
I definitely agree. Yeah, we needed that experience, and I think we both enjoyed it. I don't know. I thoroughly loved it. It's part of what I love about flying planes in general, but it's that much better when you get to hang out with a buddy and kind of share the experience and just enjoy. I mean, I was enjoying watching you get enjoyment out of your flying, like what you were doing. And I'm glad that you didn't have to stop at your plane. Okay, so your plane flew for a little bit. You got to put it wasn't an enjoyable, relaxing experience for you. And it was sort of short. And if that was your day, then, I mean, that's what it would have been. But the cool part of us being together and me having a bunch of planes with me and prepared to fly most of them, is that it's okay. That sucks. Yours didn't work. Check this one out. See if you can, let me get this set up right to be sure. Because sometimes, I don't build perfectly. So they're not all zeroed out like they should be. But once I got them set, I'm like, here you go, dude. And then you could fly and relax and enjoy. And you saw that there's a different flight characteristic. You've flown the Fogey. That flies way different than the Scout, which flies way different than
Mm-hmm.
the Simple Soarer, which flies different than the Delta. And like each has a different feel. And
Yeah.
I think I'm finding that I really love like the P-38 style plane. It has a certain characteristic about how it flies that I love. And the Simple Soarer. Like those two I really enjoy. I mean, I really enjoy flying them. I think maybe because it's not so by the seat of your pants. Like with the wing, I mean, that's by the seat of your pants if you want it to be. Like
Yeah.
you can bring it way back and have a gentle flight, but you can throttle that baby up and it's a hot mess, and in a good way, you know. Um, so I'm glad you got to get back out there with other planes and just be able to get some more, flight time under your belt, some stick time under your belt.
And I'm glad we got to do it together because, again,
Sure.
I think we both need it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree.
Now,
Very cool.
switching gears and moving on, uh, we did have a wow, I keep saying customer. We did have a
Customer, listener. Yeah.
We did have a
We have
listener.
listeners, Joe.
Yeah, we do. We did have a listener email in and ask a couple questions that are going to be more your speed to answer. So why don't you handle that real quick?
Okay. Do you want to go over what he was asking and then I'll answer?
Sure, we can do that. So, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly, but Jeff wrote in, was asking about, yeah, he had listened to our motor episode, and during that he was listening for maybe some guidance on a general rule of thumb for motor size to uh to craft weight. Like how big a motor do you need for
Mm-hmm.
the weight of the plane that you're after or that you have?
Right. And right, and there is a general rule of thumb that a lot of people use, and so it's about 100 watts per pound, and that's for a general purpose park flyer. However, if you're and maybe a powered glider, but if you're looking to do something lighter, you're going to need less wattage, so maybe 50 watts per pound, or 150 if you're looking to do a scale warbird or something along those lines. And at 150 watts, you're starting to get into the bottom end of like a 3D plane. Like so something that's like purely acrobatic, that's hovering by the propeller kind of deal.
Mm.
And then of course, when you get into like 200 watts on up, for things where you're doing racing or it's the 3D acrobatic performances. And so when you're looking at like when you think 100 watts, so I try to equate that to most like a CPAC motor runs off of 3 cells. So that's 11.1 volts. So let's call that 10 volts. And it pulls 25 amps. So that's 25 amp times the 10 volts or a little bit more. And now you're looking at, what is that, 250 watts?
I think that's how that calculation works out.
I think so. So basically, you can use a C, and that's per pound. So you have so it's 250 watts. So that's going to be a 2.5 pound plane, or a 1 kg plane, kilogram, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
So your CPAC can run that kind of plane, which is pretty. That's about right. When you look at the planes when they're all said and done, they're upwards 650 to 700, and then you add a battery that's 300 grams. You're looking at a 1 kilogram or 2.5 pounds.
Okay. So that works out. That works out for that. His follow up question to that then was: is there a rule of thumb when selecting a prop for a motor?
I'm going to say the long answer is it's a really sticky wicket. There are pages upon pages of people who compare thrust versus motor size versus prop and finding the most optimum, et cetera, et cetera. However, the short answer is look up the motor you're looking at and it's going to tell you a rough prop size to go for. They're oftentimes referring to like the slow fly version of that prop. Okay. And they may even tell you maybe it's an 11 by 7. So, and then the next rule of thumb to think about is you can trade 1 inch of diameter for 1 inch of prop. So you want to get a bigger prop, you're going to have to reduce the pitch by the same amount.
Okay, correction on that statement. You can trade 1 inch of diameter for 1 inch of pitch.
A pitch. I'm sorry, what did I say?
1 inch of prop.
Oh, 1 inch of. Of course,
you can trade 1 inch of diameter for 1 inch of prop.
Yes, 1 inch. So it's 1 inch diameter of the propeller for the pitch. So if you want to go bigger prop, you want to have lower pitch. If you want to pull more air through the screw, or that's what the prop is called, an air screw for a reason. So it travels forward more per rotation of the propeller. You're going to have to reduce the diameter of the propeller, because essentially the motor can only do so much work.
Mm-hmm.
And you're basically making a trade-off between how much area it affects versus how aggressively it tries to pull the air through.
So the short answer is look at the documentation on that motor or its recommended prop, and just start there. And a long answer being, pick up a couple props there around that size and play with it.
Exactly. Yep. I like that.
Good. Also, I found interesting.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, I think I found interesting. He sent in some pictures of a workbench that he has. Because in a previous episode, I had talked about how I wanted to do sort of a Murphy-style folding workbench for the garage. Yeah. So when I wasn't building, I could fold it up and bring the car in the garage. And when I wanted to, back the car out, fold the table down, and
be able to work
have a place to work. So he had sent in some pictures of his workbench, and for anyone interested in looking at those, we will have those linked in the show notes. So feel free to go have a look at those.
Good. Cool. And once again, thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. We're talking about batteries today.
Yep.
Go ahead.
We're talking about I'd like to focus on lithium polymer batteries specifically. That's what we're going to get into detail about, because the modern day electric planes, which is generally what we've been focusing on here in this podcast, we are primarily, the power source for that is lithium polymer. So we use other things, but maybe we'll tackle it in a different thing. Like you have nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride. Those are the regular AA batteries and the rechargeable AA's. There's lithium ion, which are similar, but they tend to have, and we'll get into what the differences of those are, but for the most part, they have the same voltage as lithium polymer per cell, but they have a different available discharge rate, and we'll get into that. But let me start but we'll go through the battery basics. We're going to cover the voltage. We're going to cover what cells are, and how they're described, like the nomenclature. We're going to talk about the capacity of a battery and its C rating, because those tend to be the big kind of items that you see when you're selecting a battery. So let's go through it. Voltages. So that's basically the amount of oomph a battery can give, or the amount of work that can be done by that amount of energy in the battery. So a battery is made up of cells, and it's basically like a little pouch that's made out of a certain, and we'll get into the chemistry of it later, but basically it's a series of layers of lithium, a lithium with a polymer goop in between, laid on a substrate. They're stacked together, they're put in a pouch, and each one has enough of those layers to store and release power in 3.7 volts nominal. That's basically the average. However, when fully charged, when basically you put energy in to fill up basically all the holes in the sponge, as it were, it will release 4.2 volts. And then when you've emptied most of that sponge out, it doesn't have as much extra oomph to give, so it'll reduce down to 3.3 volts. And honestly, anything less than that, you could be potential. That window is basically the limits of safe usage. So if you go down below 3.3 volts, you're likely to do some damage to the battery, and that could be harmful. Or you can go above 4.2 volts, and that could be harmful for the cell as well. Think of it like you're filling a bag of water with stuff, and it can only hold so much. Once you keep pushing it, it's going to burst, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's not enough, there's not enough in there to actually push any out. And then what happens is, let's say you know that the bag, when there's not enough in there, if it touches itself, it's going to start a chemical reaction, right? Because that's effectively kind of what goes on, I think, in the lithium battery. So that's why you want to keep 3.3 volts in there, so that the basically the edges of the water bag don't touch, right? You want to keep that just enough where it's not going to be a problem. All right, so that being said, so you have a 3-cell battery. It basically has 3 of these 3.7 cell, 3.3. Let me go back over that. 3-cell battery is 3.7 volt pouches that are connected in series. So the voltages stack, or the voltages add together. And so a 3-cell battery is 3 times 3.7, and it's going to be a 11.1 volt nominal voltage pack. When it's fully charged, you're going to have 4.2 times 3. That's going to be, so when you plug in your battery checker and check your fully charged battery, 3-cell battery, it's going to be at 12.8 volts. And if it's discharged as much as you're safe to do, it'll have 9.9 volts, or close to 10 volts. And that's basically as little as you want to have in that battery. And so you use the battery down to that amount, and that basically turns the motor. And then when you're done, you bring it home and you charge it back up to the top voltage, which is 4.2 volts a cell. I'm sorry. I can't do math. So 4.2 times 3 is 12.6 volts. So it'll bring it back up to 12.6 volts. Oh my God, I'm an engineer. This is disgraceful.
I've got you, man.
Anyway, so I'm sure a listener would have come in and said, "Oh my God, what is wrong with these people?" And it's not these people. It's just me.
It's just Matthew.
It's just me. Okay, so each of these packs that you have, and you'll look, if you can see, most batteries kind of have like a see-through part, and you can see through the side, and you can see that there are 3 individual little pouches. They're kind of silverized pouch.
Yeah, looking at one now.
Right. And so each one of those is a pack. And so when you notice that there'll be a rating of like 4S 1P, right? And what that refers to is there are 4 packs in series, and it's only 1 pack in parallel. So when you have really high capacity batteries, what they'll do is they'll have multiple 3-cell packs joined together in parallel to increase. So when they're in series, they add voltage, and when they're in parallel, they add capacity. And so if you're looking at a really large capacity battery, you're basically having 3 smaller batteries kind of hooked up together to add the capacity together. So you'll have a 4S, and then in the case where I was talking about 3 of those strung together, it'll be 4S 3P. And if each of those packs is 2,000 milliamps, that's the milliamp hours, which is basically the capacity. You have 3 of those together. Now you've got 6,000 milliamp battery that's rated for, what is, I don't even trust myself to do the math anymore. But 4 cells worth of voltage. So that'd be 14.8. It would be the nominal voltage in that giant pack. And then, so it'll essentially last forever. Let's see.
So,
and there are 2. You go ahead.
Yeah. So what you're saying is, in say a 3-cell battery, they're in series, which is going to stack that voltage.
Right. It's basically the negative of one is connected to the positive of the next.
Right. You stack power sources in series to increase voltage. You stack them in parallel, which is where all the positives tie into the same port and all the negatives tie into the same port. And that's
Correct.
essentially going to help you draw more amps out of it.
Exactly.
So when you're saying that you've got a three cell battery, but two are in parallel, would that not necessarily take it down to a 2-cell battery? Because
If
two
it
of the
was,
packs are in parallel with each other. Those two packs parallel to each other, and then one other one that they're serving in series together.
that battery would be incredibly dangerous and probably light on fire. If so, remember when they're in parallel, they should be identical,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you want to have each of the groups that are in parallel to each other need to be the same capacities.
Hold up.
Otherwise, you're
Now,
discharging one way down and the other one you won't discharge down, or the voltages won't be equal. And remember, think of it like a series of pools of water that have to have the same amount of water in them. That's the amount of voltage. If two of them have more water than the other, they're going to try and push all the excess water into that one that can't take it. And that's dangerous. That's what I'm talking about. So if you had a 4-cell battery, two of them in parallel, it'd be a 2S, 2P. There'd be 4 cells in
okay,
the battery, and it would effectively be 2S, so it would be 7.4 volts, but it would be twice the capacity of one of those groupings.
okay, all right, I
Okay?
got you. So what you're
Good. Cool.
saying with that is my transmitter takes 8 AA batteries, and my
Mm-hmm.
batteries were dead, and I only had 7 brand new in the pack because one went missing. What you're saying is I should not
God. Uh-oh.
have taken one of the dead ones to make that 8th battery.
No. You probably shouldn't have.
Good to
The
know.
good news is AAA batteries and AA batteries tend to have a lot more they don't have as high an energy density, and
Mm-hmm.
so they're a lot more stable in many ways. You could
Plus, I don't.
potentially basically bust the batteries, though. I think that's the danger. Is you basically have them start to corrode and have the acid come out.
Okay, but
That's a potential danger in those, I think.
and I don't know. Do AA batteries, like the alkaline based batteries, do they have a minimum voltage at what? Because Lipo, you got minimum voltage before you're worried about it. Going up in
Usually,
smoke.
usually whatever you have is only going to work if it has enough oomph to do it, right, to pass
Mm-hmm.
through the circuitry. So if you've got a battery, it has a minimum voltage for the actual stuff to work. Once it dips below that minimum voltage, there will be no flow of electricity, so it'll naturally stop at a certain voltage.
No.
And I think that's typically around 1 or 1.1. So we weren't going to talk about double A's too much, but why don't we talk about it? Each of the nickel metal hydride and nickel cadmium batteries or alkaline batteries, they essentially each have, well, the alkaline batteries have 1.4 volts per cell or 1.5 volts per cell. The rechargeable batteries, I think that's a nickel cadmium, right?
That sounds right.
Uh, I think so. And each of those gets charged up to 1.2 volts. So if you have 4 regular alkaline batteries, that's going to give you 6 volts, right? But if you have 4 of the rechargeables, they're only going to give you 4.8 volts,
Okay.
which is why your stuff stops working quicker with the rechargeables because they're already considered to be at a lower starting voltage. And as they drain, they're going to drop voltage too, so they're going to hit the threshold sooner. The good news
Mm.
is you can recharge those back up to 1.2 a bunch of times. Whereas alkalines, once they're done, they're done.
Here I
You
was
just you
thinking
have to
my
get rid of them.
rechargeable batteries were going bad.
Nope, nope.
They just didn't
It's
have that much in them to begin with.
and compared to what alkalides typically hold.
Okay.
And ultimately, the truth of the matter is that a certain number of them, if you basically added an extra rechargeable battery, your nominal voltage at the top of the volts will be the same as one less alkaline battery, right?
Right. So
So
long
for
as you do it in the correct number of and the correct batch sizes so that your voltages line up.
Exactly. Like we were talking about with the four the four alkaline batteries getting up to 6 volts. If you do 5 nickel cadmium batteries, that also reaches 6 volts. So you'll end up having the thing last just as long, as assuming that they're the same capacity batteries. It won't die out sooner because the voltage is too low.
Okay.
Matter of fact, it'll probably last all the way to the capacity of the rechargeable batteries, and then you can recharge those back up and keep doing that. So for every 4 batteries of alkaline, you could use 5 rechargeables, and they would be identical, probably outperform the alkalines. However, most battery packs are made for the alkalines, so they're either only made for 4 or 6 or 8, because most things take a multiple of 3 volts.
It's certainly not recommended to go in and like modify your battery packs to based on that information. We're just talking how things could line up.
Exactly. Unless and it's on you if you want to potentially bust your own electronics, because that's the down. Like if you try something, go ahead and try it. Just know that you could bust your own stuff. That'll be on you. Okay, so there's another 2 things, 2 ratings and stuff that are on batteries that you want to pay attention to. It's capacity, which is milliamp hours, and it's discharge rate or C rating, so charge rating.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, capacity is basically the volume of electric storage. So it's basically how big is your milk jug, right? Is it 1 gallon? Is it half a gallon? Depending on how many milliamp hours, that's how big your storage is, right? And how big your bottle is to store the electrical energy. And it's done for these lipos, they're done in milliamp hours. And oftentimes, because they can be portions of an amp oftentimes. So it's important that we have enough, basically enough detail to be able to see the differences between them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a word for that, and I'm not thinking it. So essentially,
I don't know.
That's okay. And it's basically, and that tells you the point of this is that number tells you how long it can provide the average voltage for any given flow rate. So, or any given amperage. So a 2,000 milliamp battery can supply 2 amps for 1 hour. Right, because if it's 2,000 milliamps, that's 2 amps, and that'll be for 1 hour. But if you have a motor that's pulling 20 amps when it's going full tilt, it will supply 20 amps for 1/10 of that hour. Right, so it's pulling energy faster, so it can't do it for as long. And essentially that would be 6 minutes, which is honestly about what a typical plane will fly for. And because you're not at full throttle the whole time, typically you might get a little bit more. You won't have 6 minutes, you might have 8 or 10.
And probably I would imagine you actually get a certain curve. There'd be a curve chart of, throttle value to flight time. Because,
of course,
trying to get, running at full throttle is going to use far more relatively than, say, half throttle.
Yep. If you remember back to the motor episode, each motor, well, not each motor, but oftentimes each motor will have a chart. And in that chart, it'll say using a 3-cell battery and this type of propeller, you can see how much energy, how many amps the motor is going to pull at a given throttle range. Right? It'll say 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, all the way to 100. And then it'll have how much amps it pulls. And then, of course, the voltage times the amps is how many watts. And then you can also measure the thrust that gets put out from that setup. And you can check out the efficiency, which is basically grams of thrust per watt. So per unit energy that's put into the motor. And so the lower, I guess the higher the thrust per gram. No, wait, lower. I don't know. That's the measurement of its efficiency. And so you can look there and kind of compare those things, and that's where you're going to actually see how efficient a motor is. But it's using that information. All
Sorry,
right.
sorry
So
for the tangent
no,
there.
no, no. That's okay. I mean, if it's a question you have, it might be a question a listener also has too.
Hmm.
And it may have been a question I had, and after a while realized it actually comes in a different way, right? Like it's a good question. That's how I would ask it. But it turns out when you look at the motors, that's really where you're going to get your answer,
Okay.
and its efficiency. So, okay, and then there's the next thing is like the C rating. And of course, that's the thing. You're like, what is that thing? That doesn't make any sense. What's a C? I don't have any C's. They're not in my pocket. Um, so it's basically the charge rating, and it is specifically the amount of the rate of safe continuous discharge. So, uh, let's say um, charge rate is best done, let's say, at 1C. So if you're charging a battery, you want to do 1C or 1 amp hour, is how fast you want to put energy back into it. So in a 2000 milliamp battery, you don't want to charge faster than 2 amps.
Okay.
And essentially, and that's as fast, and that's as fast as it can discharge, right? The C rating is as fast as it'll discharge. So if you have a 1C battery that has a capacity of 2000 milliamp hours, your max draw from it is going to be 2 amps. And then when you charge it back up, the rule of thumb, as I've heard it, is you want to charge back at 1/10 that rate. You can charge all the way at full rate, I think, but what you end up risking is heating the battery and causing damage. So, um, but basically, the C rating is specifically how fast the motor can safely pull energy out without risking damaging the battery. So, the higher the battery, you basically have more. Typically, that means the layers in the battery are thinner, and the electrons can exit the battery faster. And with more layers comes more refinement and better, I guess, better integration between the parts, or better interface between the parts,
Hmm.
which is harder to get and more expensive.
So
um,
if I
yeah.
have a 1300 milliamp battery, but it's rated at 1C, really the safest amount of power I can pull out of it at one time is 1.3 amp.
Yes.
Okay.
You said it was a
So
1300 milliamp. Yeah. Yep. But
okay. So I'm
most of your batteries, I think, are what, 20 or 30 C. So you can pull 20, or actually, was it 29 to 30 some odd amps out, up to 40 amps, and most of your motors use 20 to 30 amp ESC, right? So that means that they're well matched.
okay. And I
Because
guess it's worth noting because I'm running a calculation here on the battery I have in hand because I've got a 1300 milliamp hour battery rated at 75C. And
hmm
so just to do the quick calculation, I said, okay, 1300 times 75 should give me the safe amps I can pull out of that battery. And it returned 97,500 amps. So obviously that's
remember,
not
you
right.
forgot to divide by 1,000. Remember, that's
Right.
milliamps.
So
So divide.
it's right. So the C calculation is based on amps, not milliamp. So really, it's the 1300 milliamp hour battery is 1.3 amp
1.3
hour
amps.
times the
hmm
75 C rating
Yep.
gives
Yes.
me
Yes.
97 and a half amps I can pull out of that battery
Right.
safely.
Which means you could pretty much power anything that could suck juice. I mean, that's incredibly fast. At
Yeah,
that point, you're gonna have to start worrying about the connectors you have and the wire size you have, because
right. Because
that's
I think
likely to
I've got a
do
T60 connector on this.
XT60. Yeah. And we'll get into that. That
XT60.
brings us right to the next topic.
Oh, well, there you go. Go ahead.
uh, so as you look at your batteries, and that's uh, it's important that you say, okay, I have an XT60. So obviously you have this battery, and your ESC is what takes that energy and pushes it and controls how it gets to the motor, like we talked before. But they connect together, and it's important that you have connections that's identical on one piece as the other. Not identical, but mating.
Mm-hmm.
And if you aren't paying attention, and I've done this a couple times, where I selected battery is exactly what I want. I'm like, yes, I'm going to get the battery. It's going to be awesome. I get the battery, and I've got a red connector on it. What the heck is this dark red connector for? This isn't what I've got on my battery or on my ESC. I bought an
Yeah,
ESC. It's got an XT60 connector, which is yellow. I'm like, they don't
but it
work.
doesn't go in. It doesn't
They
fit
don't
together.
right. And of course, don't just touch them together because that could also be bad. But point
Mm.
is like they don't fit. Okay, this is no good. So it's important that you pay attention that your ESC and your battery have um, compatible connectors, that they are mating connectors. And so if you're buying them with the connectors already on, that's important. Oftentimes the ESCs do not come with the connector on them. You'll have to solder them on yourself. I think we talked about it in the ESC episode.
Mm-hmm.
If you do, just make sure that you've got the mating connector for the battery type. And of course, each person has a connector type they tend to like. Um, a lot in the olden days, I call it the olden days. Basically, in times before I started, which wasn't that long ago, honestly, the dark red connector or Dean's, which is oftentimes called a T plug, because one of the flats is perpendicular to the other. So there's no way you can accidentally reverse the polarization on the battery and the ESC, which would then have it flow the wrong way and basically burn out all the components. Right? You don't want that, or it would have the motor go the wrong way and it could start it burn out your stuff, which is what you don't want. So it can only go one way, and that's what all of these connectors have some fashion of doing that. But basically, you have the dark red is what was commonly used. Nowadays, it seems like the XT connectors or the yellow ones. The benefit is that one side is square, the other side is kind of hexagonal, and you can't reverse plug them into each other. So you can't reverse the polarity that way. And it also is very snug. One of the things I found with the Deans, they're sort of snug, but sometimes they're not, in which case they'll come off. So if you have a slight pull in your setup, maybe gravity moves the battery a little bit. Last thing you want is the whole thing to unplug and you have no power while you're 200 feet up.
Mm-hmm.
That's problematic. So people said, oh, I need a better connector, one that won't come apart. Again, I'm picking on Deans. I find them to be pretty snug, and a lot of people use them because they really love them. They're rated for 60 amps. And then there's XT connectors, which are also snug, and it's also hard to reverse. And they're pretty easy to solder without melting the whole setup. And those come in 30 amp, 60 amp, and 90 amp ratings. Actually, they come in a 120 amp too, but most of our setups don't usually go past 60 amps. So you'll have an XT30, XT60, or XT90. And that's basically a reference to the amperage. You'll have sometimes on like 2-cell batteries, you have uh, little red connectors. They're kind of a light red, and there may be a centimeter across or a half an inch or something along those lines, maybe a third of an inch. And then basically on one side of it is square, one flat side across the two poles. On the other side, it's kind of hexagonal. And so basically, you can't plug it in upside down. And then
Okay.
again, all of these kind of have that feature, but they're small, and these are typically only rated for 5 amps. Now, I ended up using those in my original APAC Sea Duck that I built long ago when I first started doing this stuff. And the motors I was pulling at the time didn't pull anything. Oh, geez, they barely pulled any current, right? And so I connected all these wires together and they could hold all the amperages. But the JST connectors, when I upgraded the motors to something that could pull a little bit harder and used more and pulled more amperage, um, when I flew it again, I ended up literally burning all the wires where all the current was coming together. And the connector that connected one piece to the next also superheated and somewhat melted. And that's because it can't handle the 5 currents. And so they're 5 amps, it was pulling like 20 amps through the 5 amp connector. And what happens is when there's too much current going through a component that's not rated for that, it'll end up basically heating the metal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, There's other kinds. There's a blue kind that's an EC2, EC3, EC5. I think it's like the Horizon Hobby brand version. They look very similar to the XT30, 60, or 90s. Um, and the only difference is like each of the bullet plugs are kind of individually wrapped, but they have that same kind of like square on one pin or on one plug and kind of hexagonal on the other or rounded. And then they connect together. If you have this weird kind of, geez, I don't even know, like elongated stop sign black ones, like it's big, fat, and black, and they've got, I think it's very similar to like a Dean's plug inside. And those are TRX models. Those are for Traxxas. They're typically for RC cars. So if you get a battery with one of those on them, you probably aren't supposed to use it for an airplane. They're rated for 60 amps. Oh, I forgot. The EC2s are rated for 20 amps. The EC3s are rated for 60, and the EC5s are rated for 120 amps, respectively. So typically in most of the planes, you're going to grab an EC3.
Okay.
Let's see here. You could also plug them in with bullets. Just buy bullet connectors, and they come in 2 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters, 4 millimeters, and they go up from there. And when you're like, if you look at Peter Streeple, when he built his own individual plane, he was using like 6 millimeter connectors or something like that. And if I recall right, they can pull something along the lines of like 200 amps through them safely.
Ooh.
Which, yeah, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's way more than we'll ever see here. Typically with an EDF, they go upwards. They can go as high as like 80 or 90 for the park size flyers. So you might see a 4 millimeter. But so basically a 2 millimeter plug can pull 25 amps. A 3.5 millimeter plug, banana plug, can pull 50 amps. And a 4 millimeter can pull 90 amps through it. Oftentimes you're more likely to actually see the connectors. The problem with having those kind of individual bullet connectors, which is great as a connection between the ESC and the motor, but in a battery, reverse polarization can cause damage to your components. So having those bare connectors means it's really easy to reverse the polarity by accident. So oftentimes you'll see the battery connectors to the ESC is not going to be a bare connector.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think last but not least, on the battery, you'll also have these like 4 or 5 or however many cells plus one wire. There'll be like a little white, what's called a Molex balance lead, made by JST. Same kind of people who make the light red stuff. And those are basically balance testing plugs that usually balance chargers use to check to make sure that the voltage in each cell is correct. So that when they're balance charging it, you're actually making sure that the voltages come up evenly. Because if there's a disparity between them as it's all connected, you might end up having one of the voltages in one cell trying to rush to the next one unhindered and basically heating up and maybe even starting a fire. That's one of the reasons why we try, one of the recommendations, which we'll get into, is that by all means, don't just charge your batteries, balance charge your batteries. Make sure that all the cells go up at the same volts. So that way, think of it like you have 4 pools, right? And they're all connected. And if one is way low, all of the other 2 are going to rush into that last cell as fast as possible until they're all even.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be a problem.
Right.
It turns out those white connectors, each one of those pins can have about 1 to 2 amps pull through it, which is why you can use your balance leads to power LED strips and things like that have very low current pull.
I was wondering how they were powering those.
Mm-hmm. It's because they don't pull but like a milliamp or a couple hundred milliamps, so way lower than is allowed through those pins, so to safely pull through it. Okay. And that we'll have a link to a great website that kind of goes through all of these with pictures and details. and the ratings that I talked about. So we'll make sure that those are in the show notes.
Well, real quick, we're talking about that Molex balance lead. You know what else plugs into that cord or that port?
What's that?
Our battery alerts.
Oh, yeah. Yep. The battery testers. Battery testers are basically like a little LED and a series of typically about 8 pins, and this little circuit board, and then it has two um, what are those little
Piezo.
piezo speakers,
Yeah.
right? And so basically it has two different tones it shouts out, and often has a little small button so you can program what your limits are on that. Basically, those plug into the leads, and what they're doing is continually testing how much energy is in each of those cells, and it'll scroll through the LED screen scrolls through how much is in the whole battery and then how much is in each individual cell. So it's a quick way to test, like, oh, is this way out of whack or what? You know, or is it a full volt or am I drained? So sometimes I'll have my bag with the batteries in it. Some of them get used, and I try to put them back in there when I'm not using it, and then I go, oh shoot, did I use this one or not? Because I don't have a good
Mm-hmm.
system. So one of the best ways is to pull out the battery tester, check that. If it's no good or I've drained it already, then I put it off to the side and try to find a battery that's full for the next
Yeah.
flight.
Plus, they're
Yep.
loud enough that we use them plugged into the batteries when we're flying. If we
Mm-hmm.
remember to hook them up, which I forgot when I was flying my Simple Soarer, but they're loud enough. It can be way up there, and that battery
Yep.
gets low.
And
And what I do is
you'll
I
hear
don't
it.
set it. Yeah, I don't set it at 3.3. I set mine typically like 3.4, 3.5, so I've got
Mm-hmm.
some wiggle
Some
room
time.
to bring it in on a powered landing. But it'll
Mm-hmm.
start chirping, and it's loud. And
It's
you
loud.
will hear it.
Yep, and that's the point. And that's a very cheap way to ensure that you're not going to destroy your batteries. Always
Mm-hmm.
bring those with you. If you're smart, not like me, always plug them into your battery leads when you put them into your planes. So that way, one, if they go down and you lose control, the voltage eventually will get low, and you'll hear that beeping. Maybe and you might be
Mm-hmm.
able to find your plane that way. And
You might have to be waiting a long
it's
time.
I know. Well, sometimes I mean, if the battery is low and you hear it beeping way up there, and you're trying to bring it around to a landing, and it just loses power because at that point it's losing voltage fast sometimes, and the motor just doesn't have enough juice to really push the prop around fast enough to actually really do much with the plane. So now the plane's turned into a glider, and probably if it's a warbird or a jet or something, it's a terrible glider, which means it's going to go down in the cornfield or in my case it's going to be a tobacco field way out there because you were waiting
Mm-hmm.
for one last come around, before you can land, and you're not going to make it. In which case I'm not going to see that thing. Like it's going to be a long while before I find the darn thing in, chest level corn product. So
Yeah.
that beeper can really make it much simpler. I know we talked about a little bit about it with the chemistry in each pack. So there's like a pouch. But if you've ever, and I have a link to a site that we'll have in the show notes as well. But I was looking through this because I want to see what was in a battery pack, like what's in a pouch, right? And it turns out this link also has a link to a video on a manufacturer and shows how they manufacture batteries, which is pretty cool.
Hmm.
It's basically like a 4 or 5 foot long plastic sheet, and there are blocks of kind of black lithium polymer that's spaced out evenly across it, and you basically fold it up like an accordion sandwich, and then it gets put into a pouch, um, roughly sleeved and sealed. Except before they finish sealing it, they take like a sweet polymer material, kind of like organic polymer, that gets pumped in to the pouch as it basically gets, put together. So it basically, there's a little bit of that polymer in between each accordion fold, is how they
Okay.
set it up. And they put it in, and they seal the pouch up, and then they press on it as they seal it. So they're as tightly packed as you could possibly get them, yet still have this. What is it? I keep saying it's a polymer because it is. Um, and essentially they act as an anode and a cathode. Each layer is set with a with a tab on each end so that you can connect them together, and that whole matrix gets put together and then soldered together. So it's essentially one pack with a soft plastic pouch with two little tabs. Then those tabs get alternately soldered together in series, or I think they actually flip them. That's right. It's a there it is, solvent-based lithium-ion infused organic electrolyte, which is the material. And it's essentially if you have if you busted a battery, you might smell this kind of sweet solvent, um, almost almost like some sort of radiant fluid or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
like acetone or nail polish maybe. When you smell that, that means that that gel or that lithium ion grease um, has leaked out, which means the pack has definitely been damaged. And because that's not properly between all the layers, you shouldn't use that under any circumstances. Because by putting in extra charge, it might end up basically shorting the anode and cathode and start creating um, basically a runaway heat reaction, and that high heat might help further it along. And that's typically what the warnings are, is basically that if that happens, that ends up starting to catch fire. And remember, this is just um, has a ton of densely packed potential energy, and that fire starts to release that potential energy, and it's a chemical reaction that's happening. So no amount of water or CO2 is really going to help put that out, because it's a fire that's happening because of the chemical reaction in the battery itself. So
Mm-hmm.
the best way to handle what to deal with it, and we can go over that, but is basically to smother it with a heat sink. And I think a lot of people have found that either put it in a fireproof chamber that can handle just it burning itself out, or put like a play sand or something in a bag over top of it, and the heat will basically melt the bag, and then the play sand will dump and completely surround the lithium ion pack as it catches fire. So the sand will get hot, but it's sand. It's just, you know, silica, and it'll just basically absorb the heat
Okay.
and keep the fire from spreading any further, and it'll just stay there. And so it'll still be a stinky, smoky mess, but it'll at least not have caught your house on fire. Um, so I think that's pretty much it for at least the chemistry, the basics. Um, yeah, and one of the things that they just make sure it's a low humidity, clean room environment, because moisture is a big factor in how effective some of these can be, which is why they seal the batteries.
Okay.
And like I said, we'll have a link in the show notes if you want to see more. I urge you to go do it. That whole website is a fantastic resource on lithium ion batteries or lithium polymer batteries. Okay, so now we get into the charging and discharging safety. It's basically saying that how to bring your battery from 3.3 volts, which is the low safe spot, to the full charge at 4.2 volts, or if you need it to be, if you know you're not going to use your batteries for a while, you want to bring it to the medium level, which is basically it's a 3.8 volts is the storage charge. And almost every battery charger that I've seen that's not it's over like $30. It'll have a series of programs for different types of batteries, and the lithium polymer will have charge, it will have discharge, it will have storage charge, and it will have balance charge. And honestly, I don't think I've really used any of the other ones other than balance charge when I'm trying to bring it up to 4.2 volts per cell, or storage charge, which is basically the 3.8 volts because I know I'm not going to use that battery for a little bit. Like I know I'm going on vacation for a couple weeks. I don't need all this stuff at full charge, or I know I'm just not going to get to it for a while for some reason. So,
Right.
so I store it because otherwise, keeping a battery at 4.2 volts for a prolonged period of time can do damage to the battery and reduce the amount of times you can charge it and discharge it.
Okay.
Okay.
And we already talked about how the C rating kind of impacts. Well, we talked about how C rating impacts how fast you can charge it. Because like my charger, I can say how many amps or milliamps do I want to be pushing into that battery.
Right. And exactly. So basically, what I typically do is take the capacity of the battery, divide by 1,000, and I really don't go any more than that. So if it's a 1,300 milliamp battery, I charge it at 1.3 amps, and that's it. And we make sure that your cells match. And oftentimes the battery charger will check that. And you put the battery lead connector in there so it can check as it goes. It will also check the number of cells you're connecting to the battery, so it's not going to put the wrong amount of voltage into the lead. Okay.
Now,
okay. So go ahead.
Before you get into that next bit, you and I talked about this, I think, last night. Over the weekend, we discovered that I had a dead battery. I had left it hooked up to the ESC after the Fogey crashed and never disconnected it. So you explained to me that even though there was nothing hooked up to the ESC to draw power, the ESC is still drawing a trickle current through its own electronics and doing what it does. I said, well, maybe it's got enough in there to charge. So I hooked that battery up to my charger and got a low voltage alert, which you explained was if it's below 3.3, the charger's not going to try to charge it.
Yeah, most chargers will even go down to 3.0. And honestly, that might be the low limit for most batteries. But really anything below that, you're already doing damage at 3.3. And just, sometimes the battery will go really low when you check it right as it lands. But if you give it enough time, it's almost like it has an elastic memory. So like you pulled it, it's almost like you're pulling a trampoline down as you're flying it. And then when you're done and you're not pulling on it anymore, it'll kind of come back to a certain level.
Right.
So it may read like 2.4 when you get down, but give it about 10 minutes and check it again, and it might be closer to like 3. You might be better off than you think or than you're worried about. But you, unfortunately, had a very drained battery.
A very dead battery. That battery had been hooked up for a while. So
congratulations, you successfully discharged your battery, ready for disposal.
Which I know you're going to get into in a minute. But
yeah, exactly.
We had already talked about this, but I think it's worth bringing up. I then, let me look up this error. I see what the error is. I see, it's under the low limit. The charger's not going to charge it. One, because it's just not recognizing it, but also it's not safe to charge it. So I then saw a link that was, hey, fix this problem. Which was basically, there was a couple YouTube videos that talked about it, and it said you could
use it
take your, yeah, absolutely. This next thing do not do, but you could take your LiPo battery, hook it up to your charger, change the charging mode of your battery charger to, I think it might have been the nickel metal hydride charging cycle. And charge it briefly to get the voltage of the cells up to 3.3. Turn it off, switch it back to a LiPo charge, and then the charger would recognize it. Now, you and I have talked about it, and you said, Joe, that's a pretty dumb idea, and I kind of figured it was, but why don't you explain that?
Well, it's okay. It can be, but you better be on it and make sure you're in a very safe place so that it's not going to catch anything on fire if it does backfire. Because so what you're doing with the nickel metal hydride is you're basically doing a very slow trickle charge. And so you're bringing up each of the cells very, very, very slowly and evenly. And by doing so, that allows the cell voltage to basically, I guess, kind of recover from what you've done to it. And then once you've gotten to it to a certain point, then the normal charging method should generally work. The problem with it is if you've already done the damage to the battery, you could potentially have hotspots and create basically a runaway chemical reaction and start a fire with that battery. And there have been people who say like, "Oh, everything was fine. I didn't think anything was wrong." Joshua Bardwell has a whole video on signs that your battery is telling you it's not okay. Like, pay attention. And I urge anybody here to go take a quick look at that. It's a pretty decent video on what signs, things to look for to say, oh, maybe my battery isn't healthy. And it's weird to kind of talk of them like they're a living thing, but basically, it's an energy matrix that pulls and loosely collects electrons and then releases them in a repetitive manner, and eventually that process breaks down. It's high energy density, so when it's full, there's a ton of energy in there for the size of it. So if a reaction does start to happen, it gets to be pretty dangerous. So, all right, let's go through the general safety guidelines. Okay, so lipo safety guidelines. Okay, always attend while you're charging. That means don't walk away and assume everything will be cool. Okay? So be there while like in the same room as when you're charging. I know what I do is I put it on the charger in the kitchen as much as I don't want my charger in the kitchen. And when I finally clean my shop and get it set up right, I'm only going to charge while I'm in the shop, while I'm there. And maybe that's a pain in the butt, but it's a lot better than having no house, right?
But it's
So
so
basically,
inconvenient.
I know it is. It's so inconvenient. It's so inconvenient. I mean, there's other methods to use, like make sure it's in a fireproof bunker, and then I guess do whatever you want. Because if it catches fire, well, then you've contained it, and you'll be okay. If that's how you want to do it, then that's up to you. But
No, I'm being
the
difficult.
the good guideline is be there while it's charging. Be in the same room. Don't overcharge. So there are a couple batteries called a high voltage battery. They can take 4.35 volts. That's people who are doing race quads who are like need every volt they can get, every advantage. Maybe some of the regular planes, some of the racing planes and stuff. But mostly, it's going to be 4.2 volts per cell. Don't overcharge that. Don't think you're going to shove a bunch extra juice, because every time you do that, you're damaging the battery slightly. And after a while, that's going to catch up with you and, something going wrong with your battery. Keep out of the heat if you can. Obviously, you're at the field. Maybe it's a hot day, but like you leave it in a car, all of a sudden it's going to get like 200 degrees. Okay, so try to keep it out of the heat. Don't charge a warm battery. So if you just came down and your battery's on, it's hot because you just drained the snot out of it with a jet, right? That's just pulling 90 amps out of that thing as fast as it could go, right? That battery's going to be warm when you get down. Don't quick put it on a charger and charge it back up because you want to do that. A warm battery is likely to heat up while it's charging, and that might bring it over the threshold to start the chain reaction. You don't want to risk it.
Okay.
It's not worth it. Just don't charge a warm battery and you'll be okay. Keep the batteries in the safe voltage range. Don't let them go below 3.3. Don't let them go above 4.2. Always balance charge. If you always balance charge, you're very unlikely. A battery that isn't damaged will never have a problem. Right? So always balance charge it. And even if it is damaged, balance charging it is likely going to stop it from having a real big issue. Return your batteries to storage charge if you're not using them within 3 days, because after about 3 days at full charge, if they're not If they're not used, that extra potential energy will likely start to degrade the matrix. Okay, so
Okay.
if you know you're not going to use it after a little while, or let's say you thought you're going to go out on the weekend and you didn't, something came up, and you know you're not going to fly till the next weekend, find those batteries and discharge them to storage voltage. There's a couple methods, but your battery charger typically has a way to do it too. Use a LiPo bag. When you're charging, use a LiPo bag or a fireproof box, because when you're charging is when you're likely to have that spontaneous energy release. I say spontaneous. It's basically damage that's already happened inside your battery that you can't see. And if it's there and you're charging super fast, or even just something you're just charging, you're bringing that battery from not enough potential energy to enough potential energy to start the reaction. So if it's going to happen, it's likely going to happen while you're charging it. So put it in a LiPo bag. Don't let it sit on the counter like me. Put it in the LiPo bag as you're charging it. Some people put the LiPo battery, the charger itself, and then they close up their LiPo bag. You could also build a cabinet, like a fireproof cabinet. I've got a bunch of like landscaping bricks and some of the cement board, and I've got some wool fiber that's used for kilns. And so I'm going to build that into basically a container that I can
Cool.
store my batteries and charge them and not have to worry. Like if something does go terribly wrong, it will be bad. It definitely won't be fun, but it'll be contained and everybody will be safe. So that's basically the big signs. Those are the things for Lipo Safety. So let's go through signs that you might have on an unhealthy battery. So this is after you've flown a bunch, you think you're great, everything's cool. You bring home the battery and you go, oh, look at that. I must have hit that brick wall pretty hard. There's a dent in my battery. So one of the signs, is there any physical damage to the battery? If there is, you may not want to charge it because you may have damaged the internal matrix, allowing a possibility of a runaway reaction, right? Same with puffing. If you're seeing puffing in your battery, it means it means that the gel has started to react or degrade from internal activity in the battery, and it's releasing gases. Those gases are contained because that's a sealed pouch, but that gas is a sign that there's damage in your battery. When you don't discharge equally, so when you're come down and you don't see the same voltage across all the cells, if maybe you're reading it when you first come down, give it about 5 minutes. If it's still not equal, that might be a sign that you have an unhealthy battery. If a cell is not holding voltage, like you pull it to full power and you take it out the next day and you plug in your thing and it says 4.2, 4.2, 3.8, or let's say 4.0. Wait a second, they were all 4.2 yesterday. That one cell might have damage in it and it's not holding the battery. So you might have an unhealthy battery. You could also check internal resistance. So a good battery has very little resistance, right? That's how it can discharge so fast. So if a cell is damaged, it means something's in the way, and the matrix isn't proper. It's also going to show up in a higher resistance in that cell. So if you go into your battery, hook up your battery like you're going to charge it, if you look in the LiPo settings, one of them is going to be, or as you charge it, you can go to an internal resistance check. And what it'll do is it'll put trickle current through it, and it will measure how much resistance is in each cell, and it'll display it for you. So that's one way to check it. Also, you can plug in a cell checker and just make sure nothing is lower than 3 volts. That's pretty simple. And then basically, if those things are happening, if you see those things, and you could push it, but just know that you might be risking a fire. A lot of people will store them like on their porch or in a garage, in a container. Like a garage can still catch fire, right? If they have a fireproof container, they can put it in that. Some people like build a little shed out on a porch so that they can't, they're safe to put them there and they don't have to worry about anything. It's up to you if you want to take the risk. But if you're seeing those signs, it's probably time to retire those batteries. And then the next question, Joe, I have for you is how do you store your LiPo batteries?
Don't ask me about that. So
Okay, how about this? How should you store your batteries?
so my batteries are still at full voltage from when we went flying.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I have been leaving them either fully charged or depleted when I get back from a flight trip.
Right.
And I had a lot of downtime between the last time I flew and this past time, so they were either at the low charge or the high charge for that
Right.
period of time. So
Right.
what I'm learning
And
today is put them at
that's not the
storage
best
voltage.
thing. Yeah, exactly. Right. And that's the thing. That's a pretty common thing for people getting in the hobby. They don't know anything about LiPo. LiPo's a thing. It's a way to get something done. Like it's a way to get my plane in the air.
Mm-hmm.
But and LiPo, and again, LiPos are the same thing that are in those like hoverboards that people have. Those
Right.
little things like they work great. And again, they're really safe. But we abuse the crud out of those batteries, both physically and electrically. When we use them in our RC planes. Not everybody, but especially like quadcopter people, they abuse the snot out of those things. They use them to their max, which is great. That's why we use them. But the problem is that abuse sometimes, ends up pretty bad. And we just want to make sure that everybody can continue doing this hobby and have a great time. So,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think you should store your batteries?
How I should store them, and you gave me a lipo bag,
Mm-hmm.
is I should take them to that. I understood 3.7, but I guess 3.7, 3.8
Yep.
volts on each cell, and then put them in a bag and put them up for storage.
Yep.
It I would probably end up storing them here in the man cave somewhere on a
Yep.
shelf, but in the bag so if something happened. And then the night before I'm going to go flying, it wouldn't take but an hour to charge them all up. I could do that while I'm sitting here
Mm-hmm.
enjoying the evening.
Exactly.
So,
Yep. While you're getting your planes together, you put them on the charger and kind of cycle through and make sure they're ready to go.
mm-hmm. Yep.
Good. One thing that a lot of people use are the metal ammo crates. You can get them pretty cheaply at Harbor Freight or any ammo store. The lipo bags, which are basically it's a fireproof fiberglass material. It's not going to. It might get damaged in a fire, but it's not going to melt and basically allow the flame to spread. It'll contain the flame mostly. It might actually shoot out the top, but it's basically going to keep it contained within the bag. You have to throw out your bag if that ever happens. You have to throw it out afterwards. And remember, if you're
Mm.
storing a bunch of batteries in your bag, if one of those batteries goes, guess
They're
what's
all
happening to
going.
the rest of the batteries? Yeah, they're all going. They're all
You have a
fueled with
fireworks
fire.
show,
So,
baby.
well, it's something like that. Yeah. Um, if one does catch fire in a bag, don't grab it with your bare hands. Grab an oven mitt and then go do it. Right? I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
think about
true.
it. It's on fire. Okay, be safe. But a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, and they just react, which
Yeah.
is fair. Um, if you have fire bricks or the concrete board that oftentimes gets used for bathrooms and things like that, in a Home Depot store, you can build yourself an enclosure or two to store these. As so, LiPo bags are for when you're actually charging it, and then like you have a storage place for that. And then last but not least, there's a couple of things called a bat box, and a couple of things like that. They're basically made out of fireproof brick, and they have like a plastic or a metal container with vents, so that way. And that's the big thing is if you're using like a metal ammo crate, it's airtight. You want to have some holes in the seals so that the gases and the smoke can escape. Otherwise, it becomes essentially like a little grenade. You don't want that. So you can get it buy or make a fireproof container. And then last but not least, I feel like we would be negligent if we didn't indicate how the heck do you, okay, so you have a bad battery. Maybe you're stupid. Maybe you slammed your plane into a wall or into the pavement and you damaged your battery. And you're like, it's not good. I don't trust it anymore. And once you don't trust your battery, you really shouldn't do anything with it. You should discharge it, and we'll talk about exactly how, but discharge it and bring it to a battery store, and they can
Mm-hmm.
dispose of it properly. So one of the ways is Joe found out is just plug it into your ESC forever, which is essentially one of the methods. It's a long, slow drain. For example, if you fly quadcopters, they have a thing called a smoke stopper. It's basically a current limiting device that it's a light bulb. Essentially, it's a 12-volt light bulb, and you can basically plug a 3S or a 4S battery into it. And if you short out the one end that you normally plug into the quadcopter, plug the battery in, so it's going to go through the bulb and then out to the next connector. If you short that and it goes right back to the battery, all you have is just the resistance from the bulb. Now, the bulb's going to be bright at first, but as it drains all of the energy, and that bulb will drain all of the energy from your battery, it may take a
Mm-hmm.
day. So you basically set it up in a container that's going to keep it safe in case something goes wrong. You basically leave it there and leave it there for a whole day. By the end of that day or two, it is going to be dead. It's going to be dead, dead, dead as a doornail, and you will be done. And that battery is safe now. You can also plug it up to a voltmeter and just double check it, but it should be reading nothing. Another method that I've heard is a saltwater bucket. And it's basically 30 grams of salt per liter of water. And you leave the battery submerged in essentially a fireproof container, just in case it does catch fire. Remember, it's a chemical fire, so it'll happen if it's underwater or not. And then you put it in there for like 2 weeks. And basically the conductive nature of salt water. It's very high resistance, but it conducts electricity enough where it's going to drain the battery completely in those 2 weeks. Um, and then you want to test it when it's done and make sure that all the stuff is out. But there is a disclaimer. A couple of people said it may not fully discharge, but really close. So it won't be there's not as much potential energy, and even if something happens, it won't be much.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're done, there's a lot of people who told a bunch of different things, but to me, the only safe way to really get rid of your battery, don't just throw it in the trash. Don't just throw it, bring it to the refuse center in your town and say, here you go, guys. Bring it to a battery store. Like that's their entire business is batteries. And they're happy to, give them a call, let them know you're bringing what you're bringing, and they'll tell you how to get them ready to bring to the store. And you give it to them, and then they will make sure it gets in the proper place and disposed of properly, so that as I understand it, there is no um, hazardous material in these. So a lot of people said you can throw them out, but my thought, don't risk it. Just bring it to the store. Bring it to the
Mm-hmm.
store. If it's truly discharged, you can snip off the leads and save them for a different project. When you do it one wire at a time, just in case.
Good point.
Don't cross the streams, Ray.
Nice.
And I think that pretty much concludes what I know and what I've learned about battery safety. And I hope that this has been helpful for anybody who's just getting into the hobby. It's not meant to scare you, but it's meant for you to understand the risks associated with the energy packs that we use to power these motors, and to make sure that you have the ways to do it safely, and so you can enjoy the hobby for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly not trying to instill fear in anyone over the use of batteries. Just, 99% of the time, not going to be a problem. But
Mm-hmm.
in the event there is, these are the signs. These are what you need to be aware of, and
Yep.
these are steps you can take.
And if you want to see some Lipo fireworks, go on to YouTube and look up Lipo fire, and you can see all the horror stories that people put out there. And it's not that they're trying to; they're real. They've happened. But again, you followed these guidelines that we've given you, and you should have a long, safe time in the hobby.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
All
Well, I
right.
guess that brings us to our workbench, right? And what we're going to do next.
And I'll go first on that one, as normal, I suppose. I've got some repairs and modifications to make to the simple soar.
Mm-hmm.
as it turns out, I was having to mount the battery externally because it's not a large battery, but bigger
It's a
than
tight
that
fit in there.
fuselage wanted to hold, and then having to have the ESC in there and those wires. It just. But you had already told me a while back before I ever started building that the simple sore really needed an extra 2 or 3 inches off the nose to
Mm-hmm.
help get that CG where it needed to be. Now the CG points are like the marks for where the CG should be are correct,
But to be
but
able to balance it, that extra couple inches makes it much easier to do with the
right.
battery that
So
you have, right?
yeah, definitely. And so I'm gonna be repairing the simple sore. Looking forward to getting that one out and flying it and getting it trimmed in right. I do want to tackle the simple cub.
Good.
Again, going back to the conversation a couple episodes ago when we talked about I had gone up and spent time with my father-in-law, so I want to have that one so I can answer questions he might have, or be able to help him walk through some problems, or just go up and fly with him. Um, and then from there, I do want to dive into either something like the Spitfire or um, fully redesign my old glider, since I now realize that it was basically a simple soar, just not quite so simple and did not quite soar.
I'll tell you what, I was not going to stop you from. I mean, what you pulled together. Once I saw it, I'm like, I had in my head, I'm like, that's a simple story. I might have even said as much, but you didn't know what that was at the time, and that's
Yeah.
what you came up with in your head and did it your own way, which I'm absolutely in love with. I think that's amazing. And I would never discourage anybody from trying that. Now that you have some things under your belt, you've tried a couple different designs, and you've learned a couple construction methods that you go, okay, this is the benefit of this, and this is,
Mm-hmm.
now you can go back at that and maybe bring that success to the glider and kind of re-envision it in an even better way, or really be just even more excited about it. So I'm excited to see no matter which you tackle. And I'd like to apologize on air in front of everybody that when I came down, I asked Joe specifically, "Hey, are there plans that you would like me to bring down with me? Because I've got a ton of copies of different plans that I printed over time." And Joe's like, "Yeah, if you could bring down a Simple Cub or a Spitfire, that'd be amazing." And I said, "That's easy enough to do." And I got so excited, I jumped in my car and took off. Partly because I was waiting for an AC guy to fix my AC, and it was awful that day. Anyway, and so I was just so excited he was done. I was excited to be on the road and heading down to visit these guys that I just completely forgot. I felt like such a fool. But so
It'll
I'd
be
like to
all right.
officially apologize in front of everybody that you if I get my butt in gear, I'm hoping that maybe the beginning of next week you might have some plans in your mailbox. But um,
Don't worry about it, because you know I now know how to poster print, and I can
hmm
print them off on my printer. Just a little
sure,
extra tape.
all right. Well, okay. I just
All
know
right,
that I do
what's
feel bad. I'm sorry.
nah, it's fine. What's on your bench right now?
Okay. I for my birthday, which was a week ago, 2 weeks ago, I ended up picking up a 3D printer. Right, and it came at the end of that week of my birthday. I put it together, and as you can attest by occasional things here and there, that I've been a nonstop printing fool. I'm actually right now printing a 3D test print for a wing. So basically, I'm 3D printing a very small plane for RC. I'm going to see how that goes. So far, it hasn't collapsed like I thought it was going to do, so that's sweet. Um, so I've got that, and I've been printing retractable landing gear. I'm also printing something so that I can cut out my foam designs directly with a needle cutter. So I'm excited to see if that goes anywhere.
Hmm.
With any luck, I'll have that done. But I've got some uh, home maintenance to take care of before I get too far into that. Um, the Viking is pretty much done being built. I have the landing gear to fix up. That's part of what I was excited about. I've got no retractable nose gear I got to put in and figure out how I'm getting the rear gear set up. But once that's done, this plane is ready to give a go. So I'm excited about that. The Synergy Master Series build, I've got the fuse built and I've got the wings ready to kind of close up and and pull together. So that should be on the docket next time we talk. And when I came down, we had the AIR 99. It's a 90 millimeter EDF jet that I designed and built, and I brought down, but I was too chicken to try. We also ran out of time with the
We ran out
with
of
the thing,
time.
but to be honest, I was also chicken. We gave it a quick glide test at the end of the thing, which it's heavy. It's 1.5 kilograms, so that's what 4 pounds or something like that. But as I understand it,
keep going. I'll Google it.
That's okay. Either way, it's heavy, and it's heavier than most of the flight test stuff. So I'm going to put some landing gear on that, and that way I can bring it out to my field and fly it off of the grass. Because everybody keeps telling me, "Oh, just throw it in the air," and I think they just want to see a crash video. And I'm not really ready to dump that into the ground yet. 3.5 pounds, 3.3 pounds. That's it. Nice. Okay.
Roughly.
And let's see, I've got FT Easy STEM stuff that I've got the Easy system, and I know, like, when I get free time, I kind of like to dabble in a design and make it FT Easy, like I did with the Viking S3. I made a little one, and I also have finished making the Vance Viking, so I think I'm gonna make build number 2 that's a little bit more robust in the fuselage. And if anybody wants, I can look at my YouTube and see how that flew, and there's PDFs and stuff like that if you want. And then I think that pretty much, I think I'm probably going to ease off. The kids are going to start school, and I'm going to have to focus in on that. So likely, other than what I mentioned, that'll probably be it. It's still a lot, but normally I'm starting something brand new too.
I imagine your buildings will slow down quite a bit.
A lot of people hope so.
Theoretically.
I know, right? Anyway, we'll see. I've got the Spitfire in my head. I printed out 3D parts to go with the Spitfire for retractable landing and things like that. So if you end up printing out a Spitfire, we are definitely doing a build night, and I've got a kit that I purchased that's ready for build. So
nice.
I'd be happy to sit down with you and bust through that. That'll be fun.
Awesome. Did we have next episode planned already, or were we still debating on what we were going to do there?
I think we're going to talk about simulators. Because now that you have, like, how the systems work, generally, now it's get some stick time. So that way, when you pull your plane together with that knowledge, you can practice on how to fly it, so that when you get out there, you don't just put it into the ground and be discouraged with the whole hobby.
There we go. All right. Well, with batteries out of the way, a little longer than I think we anticipated it being, but hopefully it was some good information. Matthew, thank you for doing all the research and most of the talking this episode.
It was my pleasure. Just know that next time, I'm going to hope that you can pick up some of that. No, honestly, it's fine. I'm having a good time with this, man. I hope you are too.
I am. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and call it there. Thanks for listening in to this episode. If you have questions, feel free to email us, aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Questions, comments, let us know what's going on. We love to hear from you. And we'll catch you next time.
Catch you next time. Thanks for listening.
Later, guys.